Our resident commentator on the passing scene is award-winning author Harlan Ellison. When we call him award-winning, that's an understatement. Harlan has won more awards for his 58 books, more than 1,100 stories, articles, essays, and columns than any other living fantasist. His film criticism has been appearing for the last 8 years in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, and like our commentaries here, is called Harlan Ellison's Watching.
One of the things that gets me crazy, and it gets every writer crazy, whether they're in this field or any other genre, is getting one of these letters from somebody in East Chittling Switch, Georgia, or some other center of great wisdom, saying, well, I know you're a great writer, and I just love your works, but I can't find any of your books on the newsstand. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why, dummy. You also can't find Joseph Conrad's books, or Edith Wharton's books, or Mark Twain's books. That's because this is a market-driven industry. If any part of that phrase confuses you, turn to the person next to you and say, what means that, market-driven? What it means is that the ad men and the marketing people and the advertising people tell you what will go and what will sell and what will not sell. Now, if I have a book come out today, a paperback, and it goes on sale, and they put it in the 7-Eleven spinner racks, right? Now, first of all, the top pockets of those 7-Eleven spinner racks are purchased by the big paperback houses. We're talking Pocket Books and New American Library, which is Signet Books, and Bantam and Dell. And that means that if you're in one of the lesser companies, you are stuck in one of the lower pockets. Now, you know yourself, when you go into one of those 7-Elevens or some other fast shopping place, you spin the rack and you look at what you can see. You do not bend down, because if you bend down, 27 people are going to trip over you and dump their Slurpees all over you. So that means that if you got a book in one of those bottom pockets, forget it. You are necky hooky, no price. You can't sell the book. But let's say that the book does get up into one of those upper pockets. How long does it stay there? What is that? A month? What, you said, what, 6 weeks? And you over there sitting on the sofa stuffing your face with Twinkies. What'd you say? What, a week? No. What you've got is 4 days. 4 days before they bring in the next batch of books. In the course of a month, paperback publishers will publish something like 2,000 different titles. Now that means that the only ones that are going to get really put on the top are Danielle Steele and Stephen King and Louis L'Amour when he was alive, and whoever is this month's flavor of the month, you know, like John Grisham. And that means that everybody else who is called mid-list gets shoved to the bottom. Now that's the ideal situation. You want to know how long it is in the biggest newsstand in America? First of all, do you know where the biggest newsstand in America is? No. Good guess, but no. I'll tell you where it is. It's at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. They have the largest newsstands in the world there. In those satellites, they sell more paperbacks per annum than entire cities, entire states. And you know how long you've got there to make it? How long do you say? What? 1 day? 2 days? 5 days? No. You got 3 hours. One day I was waiting for a plane. I was transferring heaven knows where, and I met the guy who comes around with the little cart, and he's dragging the slab cart behind him that's got all the boxes of books. And I'm watching him fill the pockets in these newsstands in the different satellites. And I said, how long can you tell when a book sells there? He says, you got 3 hours. He will load up a pocket. He'll put 4 of everything, and then he will go away. His rounds around all of the satellites of O'Hare Airport take him 3 hours. When he comes back, if he put up 6 copies of my book, and there are 4 still there, and he put up 13 copies of the Stephen King book, and there's 1 there, out come my 4, and in go 13 more of Stephen's books. Now, that's why you can't find any of my books. I got 59 books. None of them are in print at the moment. And I'm not the only one.
In the 25 years since Stanley Kubrick's benchmark film 2001, A Space Odyssey came out, Sci-Fi Buzz commentator Harlan Ellison says many film and TV producers he knows in Hollywood haven't learned a thing. They're still wooden heads when it comes to space.
It's 25 years since 2001 came out. 2001, 25 years. Do you remember when you saw it at the Cinerama Dome? Remember how bored you were? I remember how bored you were. You said to me, this is a very long film. Well, yes, I know, of course, that they cut it. They chopped down the running around the centrifuge spaceship there thing. I know they cut down the pavane, the stately pavane of the spaceship at the beginning with the Blue Danube. I know they cut all that down. But at first, every critic in the country hated it. Everybody thought it was dopey. Everybody thought it was stupid. It was very weird. Then all of a sudden, every acid head in the world loved it and went there for the trip, and word of mouth, and boom, now it's a classic. Gaze with me into the vastness of space. See up there? Up there, there is no sound in space. It's vacuum. That means no air. That means they can't see any laser beams, because there ain't no dust in the air. It really is a classic, particularly when you look at what's come since, and when you realize that nobody bothered to learn any of the lessons that Kubrick taught them. I mean, we still have explosions in space. We still have rocket ships that act like they were Focke-Wulfs and Fokkers and Stukas and Japanese Zeros. I'm telling you, they didn't learn the lessons of that movie. We can still hear crashes and bashes. Kubrick was an artist. Kubrick was a cinematic genius, as opposed to, well, I don't know, the people who did Buck Rogers or the people who did Battleship Galaxitive. I mean, these are all just imitations, I guess, of Star Wars. And I get very annoyed. George Lucas is a lovely man. You remember the conversation I had with George? And I said to him, George, how could you make a film like this and spend all this money and still have explosions in space that we hear? Everybody knows it's a vacuum in space. How can you teach kids stupid science like this? Aren't we stupid enough? And George said, we didn't want to do it, but people expect it. People expect it? What, do they think we're made of wood? Nice seeing you, Dave. Take care of yourself.
You know, I seldom talk about myself personally. I'm one of those self-effacing kind of guys. But I thought I would tell you about my wife. My wife, Susan, is a strange creature who fell from the moon. She murdered her first husband to gain control of his steamship line. I married her 7 years ago. We actually lived in sin for a year. Well, we didn't actually live in sin because, as it is well known, I am a person with no sex organs. This is not my fault. It was very cold one day in New York. I think it was, minus 20 below zero, something like that, and I had an accident. My wife has threatened to leave me if I continue doing these and if I keep talking about science fiction. But I have to eventually talk about women. I have to do it. I have to talk about women in science fiction. And I was originally going to do this kind of thing, they said, well, aren't you going to be a little controversial? I was going to say, ain't there too many broads writing in science fiction at the moment? And they said, well, you can't say a thing like that. I said, what part of that bothered you? Well, I was thinking about women in science fiction. Now, when I came into this vaunted field, which was in the early 50s, there were only 3 or 4 women who were writing science fiction, maybe 5, and all of them were writing under names that were either patently man's names, like Andre Norton, who was, of course, Mary Alice Norton writing, or C.L. Moore under initials, and that was Catherine L. Moore. And they were brilliant writers. A woman named Lee Brackett, and I always thought, like the knee-jerk liberal moron that I am, that the more women we had in the field, the better it would be, because they would bring to the genre a sensibility, a view, a worldview that we as men did not have. We simply didn't have. And so along about the early 60s, late 50s, early 60s, maybe middle 60s, I don't know, something like that, there started to be some enormous breakthroughs. There were some astonishing women writers. Astonishing writers who happened to be women. Ursula Le Guin, Joanna Russ, Vonda McIntyre, Carolyn Cherry, Kate Wilhelm was doing important things at that time. I got a little list here so I wouldn't forget. And we thought, now it's going to happen. And in fact, a great many women ran through that rip in the membrane that had been caused by brilliant writing of Ursula's and Joanna's. And they were writing books that were astonishing, dealing with very difficult subjects. And now we come to 1993, where exactly half of the final nominees on the ballot for the Nebula are women. Half of them, 50%. Not 42% or 37%, or we're giving a nod to women by having 6 on there. Fully half, and maybe more. One of them is initials I've never heard of, S.N. Dyer. I don't know that writer, so it may be a man or a woman. But at least 50% of the writers on here for the final ballot for the Nebula are women. And some of them are brilliant writers. Connie Willis is writing some of the best stuff that's ever been written in the field. And Karen Joy Fowler is absolutely astonishing. But when I go to the newsstand, and I go to the bookstore, and I look at the books, what I see are these idiot trilogies written. They start off being written by Anne McCaffrey with Mercedes Lackey. Then Mercedes Lackey becomes a big name, so it's Mercedes Lackey and Elizabeth Moon or whoever. And then Elizabeth Moon becomes a big name, and it's Elizabeth Moon and Ellen Dwan, and then it's Ellen Dwan and they go on and on and on. They're fantasy, I suppose, but they're the kind of fantasy that could be written by anybody. Male, female, neuter, alien, me. With the exception of the Karen Joy Fowlers and the Connie Willises and the Pam Sargents who are writing, most of these novels are just awful, whether they're men or they're women. But like the knee-jerk liberal idiot that I am, I expected better of women, that if they were given the opportunity, they wouldn't repeat the same stupid errors that us guys did. At least, my wife keeps telling me that's the case.
Hello, brethren and sistren. The sermon for today. Actually, it's not a sermon for today. Actually, this is a follow-up to one of the commentaries I did several weeks ago. I'm sort of answering my mail here. When I did the piece on women writing in science fiction, and I named a lot of writers, and I thought I was going to get pilloried. But I got a letter, and I can't show you the letter, because if I show you the letter, you'll know who wrote it. And that would be betraying the trust of the person who sent it to me. But I've used yellow highlighter here, and I think I've got the salient parts, and I'd like to read you what this writer, a woman, wrote to me. A woman who is a writer and an anthologist, very well known, very highly respected, and she was talking about the commentary that I did about women writing in science fiction. She wrote, "Dear Harlan, I was in the kitchen washing dishes a short while ago when somebody came in to tell me that the television was about to emit something interesting. I asked the obvious question, and he said he was watching Sci-Fi Buzz, and Harlan Ellison's going to talk about women, SF, and fantasy writers. Well, he asked me what had made, I came rushing in. He asked me what had made me so eager and curious. I replied that I wondered if you were going to name names, and he asked for further explanation. I explained that just the weekend previous, and here she names three other writers, three other women writers of extraordinary award-winning quality, and she had gone on at great length, but in private, about the sad state of SF and fantasy due to the proliferation of poorly written books by women who clearly didn't know better about anything from men to sentence construction. We," and she names the women again, "agreed that the situation wouldn't get better until we stopped being polite to each other just because we were all women, but none of us was ready to name names in public." She goes on and she says some more things, and then she says, "Then you came through with vintage Ellison, sharp, precise, and naming names. May the gods, whoever and wherever they are, smile upon you for once again speaking the truth. I don't know if you consider me with the sheep or the goats, but I think the genre is being inundated with waves of pseudo-feminist fantasy trash. One damn thing after another. Plots, cardboard characters, politically correct and recycled, and facile resolutions the Brothers Grimm would laugh out of fairy tale heaven. And a lot of this trash is being typed or keyed, but definitely not written, by pairs of women." I take this letter as a great badge of honor. This is a fine writer who sent me this. From time to time, I'll update you. The only other thing I need to update you with are these two small items. One of them has to do with the Nebula ballot. Remember I said it was exactly 50% women? I was wrong. It was over 50%. There was a name I did not know, S.N. Dyer, D-Y-E-R. Well, it turns out S.N. Dyer is a pseudonym, and it is for a woman. I won't give you her real name, although she does write under that name because she hasn't given me permission to. But that means that the Nebula ballot this year was 60% women instead of 50. The other thing you need to be updated on to know exactly where I stand so you won't think I have any hidden agenda, on June 14th, I started work as the conceptual consultant on the forthcoming television series Babylon 5. If I now say anything bad about Star Trek or Deep Space Nine or anything like that, you'll know that I possibly have a secret agenda, so you can discount anything I say. Oh, to tell the truth, honor, money, time, ay, ay, ay.